Okay, so as the Florida Coalition Against Human Trafficking, we work in two different prongs. We work in prevention and education, and that deals specifically with the community. The community is kind of a little bit unaware of the fact that Florida is number 3 in the entire country for human trafficking, and Southwest Florida is actually number 1 within Florida. And then the second aspect we work in, and it's going to be the aspect of more of like, I guess, if you want to cut that out, actually.
Okay, I'll cut that.
Okay. It's more the aspect of actually helping victims. We're an umbrella organization that actually works with a bunch of other community partners. The other community partners are things such as mental health counselors, shelters, and then case managers. And we actually, if there is a victim that comes to us, we kind of just give them different support they need in different realms. So if somebody were to come up to us and say, oh, we need shelter, so we plug them in with another shelter that's a community partner. If they need a mental health counseling, we plug them in with that. And that's kind of how we work as an organization. So yeah.
What do you guys know about human trafficking?
It's not
It's
good.
really bad. So Florida is actually number 3. And
South number 1.
yes, this guy.
I
Amazing.
know my stuff.
That's what's up. Yeah, so we're trying to raise donations to go towards that. So, awesome.
Thank you.
Name and number on this one, and then I'll trade you to take this one. That's amazing.
Thank you, Sarah.
Okay, so what is your role in the coalition and what made you join?
So they actually kind of work together in that aspect. The reason that I actually joined the coalition and my role in the coalition is I initially started as a communication intern because I actually am a communication student here at FGCU. So with that, I actually took over and I did all the stuff like social media, I did marketing, I did events, and kind of everything in that realm. And then when I started again back in January, they actually kept me on and they hired me. So with that, then I took over admin as well. So that stuff is such as like volunteers, and then it also kind of like expanding what I've already been doing. I'm the first point of contact between us and community partners, us and volunteers, and really kind of anyone who would come to the organization that really needs help.
And then what does the coalition stand for?
So the coalition actually stands for, we kind of more focus on the way of community partners. Community partners is our most important thing that we actually deal with. Because as a coalition, we're actually an umbrella organization. As an umbrella organization, we actually work in any different aspect that human trafficking victims would need us. So for example, if there was a victim that came to us and they needed help with like mental health counseling, they needed shelter, they needed case management, we'd be their first point of contact, and then we put them together with our different community partners. Our mission statement, I believe, I don't know the exact wording right now, but it's actually long-term solutions to help victims with in regards to different regional partners. So it kind of just follows into that same thing. Also, we focus on 4 different prongs. So it's prevention, prosecution, partnership, and then protection. So we work in those 4 different aspects to help victims in any way they need, and then also with prevention aspect of it, focusing on education. So we do a lot of community presentations at things such as like libraries, churches, schools, just anything we can do to get the issue out to the public.
Okay. And what is one story that impacted you the most?
So actually, I have one really prominent story because, like I said, I was hired on in January. That was actually after I did my internship, and the first part of my internship was all focused towards our big annual 5K, and it was our first 5K, so it was a lot of planning for that. But I never actually met any individual victims until that point, just because most of the victims actually work with social workers. I'm not a social working student or a social worker, so I really didn't get to meet any. But then when I did the 5K, I met a girl who was 16 years old, and she was actually trafficked by her father. She got out of the situation, but she was telling me that what we were actually doing impacted her so much, and it was the first actual event that she'd been out in the community and telling her story. So that was the one thing where it kind of clicked to me, where it's like, hey, what I'm doing actually matters. Yeah. You know, I've been working on this 5K for a good like 4 months, and now I'm actually seeing like the actual benefits of it. So that was kind of my story with it. She had a big story in the news with Wink News that her father actually had gotten out of prison. And so we're actually doing campaigns with her right now to actually figure out how to get him back in prison. So yeah.
Yeah. And then what are 2 things that most people do not know in terms of human trafficking?
So the two big things is, and this is actually what I tell everyone the first time that they actually come to one of our presentations, or that I do kind of like my little spiel with them, is actually that number one, Florida is number 3 in the nation for human trafficking. Southwest Florida is number 1 within Florida. So it's a huge issue here. Most people actually think that it's an international issue and that a lot of them are actually taking place in different countries and they're coming into the United States. That's not true. It's happening right in our backyards. A lot of other people think that it's just immigrants, and immigrants is a huge population of it, and that's a huge prominent issue that needs to be taken into consideration. However, it happens to any person. It can happen to children, it can happen to young children who are even in Bonita Springs. I mean, we had the big case, it was, I believe, 15 people were busted, that they were taking local goods. So it can happen to anyone. And then number 2 is also the fact that it's not just, however, it happens to any person. It can happen to children, it can happen to young children who are even in Bonita Springs. I mean, we had the big case, it was, I believe, 15 people were busted, that they were taking local goods. So it can happen to anyone. And then number 2 is also the fact that it's not just sex trafficking. Sex trafficking makes up about 40% of human trafficking as a whole. 60% is labor trafficking. Taking that into consideration, you also have to look at the people such as like the farm workers in Immokalee. That's a big issue within labor trafficking. And then also the issue of just like different communities within the middle of the state, you know, the ones who aren't actually as recognized. I know there was an issue of domestic servitude, that there had been a woman who was kept prisoner in somebody's house and she was doing work. I mean, they didn't treat her horribly, but she was basically doing slave work, essentially. So that's also another issue that people don't actually know as well.
Interesting. And then, how can people help and support human trafficking victims?
So the number one thing that we always tell people is if you do see a situation with human trafficking, don't intervene in the situation. Know the signs. We do community presentations, like you said, so you can come to any of our presentations. They're actually online. It's slavefreeflorida.org is our website. And they can actually come and watch one of those, but it's just the signs, and then also to know the human trafficking hotline. That's the number one thing that we want people to know. It's available online. You can find it at any time. And if you do see anything that's even just like a hint that it may be a situation of human trafficking, to just call and report it. And reporting has increased a lot in the last few years. We want it to continue. So it's just trying to make sure that everyone is actually aware. But then also as well, with the advocacy aspect of it, come and volunteer. We have tons of different volunteer opportunities. We do events, you can come work in our office, and just any way that you'd be able to help us would be 100% very, very needed.
Yeah, noted. And then how can people identify potential victims, and what should they do?
Okay, so going kind of back to the last question with that one, the ways that we kind of notice that victims are very passive, a lot of them are younger. The number one thing to look for is that they have an authority figure who is talking for them. I know that Christian, who is our educational coordinator, he always brings up the situation that he actually used to own a hair salon, and there was a young lady who would come in, and every time she came in, there was an older man who came with her, and he spoke for her. He said what type of haircut that she wanted, and then he also mentioned the fact that the older man would go back when the girl would like get her hair like washed. So just kind of like noticing things like that. Also, you can kind of tell if they all, sometimes they have like tattoos. If you have like a group of girls who have the same tattoo, that may be a warning sign. Or just the fact that they kind of are like disoriented, obviously, and then just like signs of prostitution that sometimes you'll see that kind of will just like raise concern.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you for your time. That was really
You're very welcome.
Come and get your hair cut, get your head shaved. That
Late
was the
class?
perfect watermelon.
That's me.
It's for what? How much?
So, yeah, so the
Before, I didn't think human trafficking was a serious thing. Then I saw Taken, and it kind of glorified it, so I didn't really think of how big of an issue as it is. But it turns out that human trafficking is something very serious. Did you know South Florida is actually one of the predominant places that has to do with it in America? I believe that raising awareness is beneficial. It helps the people who are dealing with this issue, and if you raise awareness, you can help those people all over the world.